Welcome back to Clash of Coaches. Today we're going to be talking about the ACC conference in college football through week 5, just kind of looking at the standings, seeing what teams are where, projecting who's going to make it to the ACC title game, who we think is going to win it. Just my overall thoughts on the ACC. I'm obviously a big Clemson guy, as you guys can see behind me. Clemson's in a bit of a down year, but the ACC is up, man. I think 5 ranked teams in the ACC right now, and Clemson is not one of them, which is really odd. But it's going to be interesting to talk about this conference. Kind of, like I said, project and predict how the conference is going to end up, how it's going to finish, because it's looking like a wild ride so far. But let's get right into it, man. So nonetheless, right now, I'm just going to kind of read you guys the standings for the ACC. I won't be able to pull it up on the screen, but I'm going to read the standings for the ACC and just kind of give my thoughts of each team as I go. So as of right now, you have Louisville, who's 3-0 in conference, 5-0 total, or with an overall record of 5-0. Ranked number 25 right now, so they're leading the conference right now. Then you have Florida State right behind them, 4-0, 2-0 in conference. And then you have North Carolina 4-0, 1-0 in conference. Then Duke 4-1 and 1-0 in conference. And then the rest of these guys are either 1-1 or 1-2, and that being NC State. Virginia Tech is 1-0 in conference as well, but they're 2-3 overall. Then you have NC State at 1-1, Georgia Tech at 1-1, Clemson at 1-2, Boston College at 1-2. Miami is 4-0 without any conference play. So they're ranked number 17. So they're going to have a bulk of their conference play coming up with Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Clemson, Virginia, NC State, Florida State, Louisville, and Boston College. So they play their 4 out-of-conference games kind of up front, which is a little odd. But yeah, I mean, this is a crazy year for the ACC, especially when you have a team like Clemson who's won 7 of the last 8. And realistically, they're probably not even going to make it to the ACC title game because of the losses to Duke and Florida State. They would need a lot of dominoes to fall in their direction or to fall their way in order for them to be able to make the ACC title game. Is it impossible? No, but the betting lines would say not to bet that. So I think as of right now, as it stands, I like Florida State in the ACC title game. I think they have the easiest path to get there after beating Clemson. They still play Duke, which I think they'll beat Duke at home. They still play Miami at home. So really their 2 toughest ACC tests are Duke and Miami, and they get to be home in both of those games. So I think Florida State is really penciled in at in the ACC title game. I don't see them falling to Duke or Miami at home. And even if they do fall to one of them, I don't think there's going to be 2 other one-loss teams in conference play in the ACC. So I think Florida State really controls their own destiny when it comes to winning the ACC and ultimately getting that playoff bid. The next team I'm going to talk about is Louisville. Obviously, I've been very high on Louisville. We did their preview early in the year, and I told you guys I think they would be 10-2 or 11-1 heading into the conference championship week, and I'm going to stand on that. Obviously, a big win against Georgia Tech in week 1. They beat Murray State. Then they beat Indiana, Boston College, and then NC State last week in a defensive battle, 13-10. This week they play Notre Dame. They come in as a touchdown underdog. I don't think they're able to pull this game off. I would be very surprised if they won this game based on Notre Dame's kind of history so far against Duke and Ohio State. I think Notre Dame is just a more proven team in big-time games, back-to-back college game day games, and you win or you lose, obviously, to Ohio State by the last-second touchdown or whatever, but then you beat Duke with a go-ahead 4th and 13 or 4th and 16 run by Sam Hartman. I just think they're a little bit more battle-tested. So I like Notre Dame in that game. But after that, I think Louisville realistically can win any one of those games. So I think of the 7 games they have remaining, I do have them going 5-2, losing to Notre Dame and losing to Kentucky. I think they beat everybody else on the schedule. I do think they beat Duke. I hope they beat Duke because I need Duke to lose a few games as a Clemson fan. And then I think they beat Kentucky at the end. So I think they finished 10-2. I think worst case they finish 8-4, which is still a really solid year for Louisville. And I think 8-4 with losses to Notre Dame and Kentucky. Those are 2 losses out of conference play. So they're still going to end up finishing, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They'll still finish, 7-2 in conference. Which could realistically get them in the ACC title game, depending on how Duke finishes their year. So I do like Louisville a lot. I think they have a lot of potential, and it's just going to be interesting to see how they fare against Notre Dame this week. Then we have North Carolina coming in at number 14 this week in the AP poll, 4-0, 1-0 in conference play. They still have a hellacious schedule to end the year. They play Syracuse this week, who obviously Clemson beat last week, but Syracuse is a really tough defense. You still got to play Miami. You still have to play Duke. You still have to play Clemson, and you still have to play NC State. I expect North Carolina to drop a few games. I thought they would be a lot better than what we've seen so far. Obviously, barely beating Appalachian State in double overtime. Beating South Carolina by 2 touchdowns was a good win. Beating Pitt by 17 was a good win. But I think when you look at the remaining teams they have left on the schedule, I know Clemson is 3-2, but Clemson is probably going to come into that game the favorite because it is at home. Clemson is the home team in that game. NC State has a tough defense. Duke has proven to be a tough out, beating Clemson and barely losing to Notre Dame. Miami's undefeated, who they play them in 2 weeks. So I think realistically, North Carolina is going to finish 9-3, 9-3, maybe 8-4. Just depends. Could they win all these games? Sure. I probably wouldn't bet that, but it's definitely possible. But I like North Carolina as well. I probably don't think they're going to make the ACC title game, though. I just think Florida State's road there is a little bit easier, and I think Louisville's road there is a little bit easier. So we'll just have to see. But moving on, we have Duke coming in at, I think, 4-1, with obviously the loss to Notre Dame. But nonetheless, Duke is a really good team. They're not just a basketball school, so let's dead that narrative now. Number 19, 1-0 in conference play. Remaining on their schedule, I know they play Florida State still. They play NC State. They play Louisville. They play North Carolina, and they play Pitt. I think this team is going to finish like 9-3. I think they had a great start to the season, but I just think they're not as good as, a team like Florida State. I don't think they can dominate a team like North Carolina. Could they win that game? Of course, but I probably favor North Carolina a little bit in that matchup. So I think their ceiling is 10-2 because I think they're going to lose to at least Florida State. But I probably have them 9-3 or 8-4. Ideally, like I said, as a Clemson fan, I'd love to see them lose to Florida State, Louisville, and North Carolina. And then if Clemson were to win out, then they have a chance to kind of put themselves back in the ACC title picture. But we'll talk about Clemson now. 3-2, 1-2 in conference play. I think this is the first time in however many years that Clemson started 0-2 in conference play, which is kind of crazy. But I think when you look at their remaining schedule in conference, they have one of the easiest ones next to Louisville. You play Wake Forest this week, who you're a 21-point favorite in. Then you play Miami at Miami. That's going to be a very tough game. Then you play NC State. You host Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, South Carolina. I think of the final 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ACC games, I would say 3 of them are, I wouldn't say gimmies, but I feel very confident with them as a Clemson fan. I feel very confident in Wake Forest, NC State, and Georgia Tech. The only 2 conference games that I'm like, is Miami and North Carolina. But I think we could win both of those games. So I think if you just say worst case scenario, Clemson finishes 9-3 with a loss to Notre Dame, and in conference, what would you be? You'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're 6-2 and 6-2 in conference, and you're 9-3 overall. You would realistically need Duke to lose a few games, and you would only need Duke to lose a few games, unless Louisville runs the table or North Carolina runs the table, obviously. But I don't think the door is completely shut. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But the ACC there's a lot of parity in the ACC this year. Obviously, Louisville coming out of nowhere, which I predicted. You had Duke coming out of nowhere, which my dad predicted on the channel. And then you still have teams like Miami, who hasn't had any conference games, but they're undefeated. You still had Florida State, who was a heavy favorite. You have North Carolina, who was a contender for the ACC this year. So it's very interesting to look at the ACC and kind of how the conference looks this year. The last team I want to talk about, though, is Miami. Number 17, 4-0 in conference play. Big win over Texas A&M early in the year. This week they play Georgia Tech, 21-point favorite. I expect them to handle Georgia Tech and move on to 5-0 and then 1-0 in conference play. Then the week after that, they play North Carolina and they play Clemson. Those are 2 games that's going to really, be the telling tale for this team in the season. If they're able to beat Clemson and North Carolina, Miami is going to go to the ACC title game. The reason I say that is their only final 2 tests are Louisville and Florida State. But I think even if they lose both of those games, being 10-2 and 7-2 or 6-2 in conference play, you're going to get in the ACC title game with that record. And I think they have a chance to beat Florida State. I think they have a chance to beat Louisville. So it's really going to come down to the Miami game and the Clemson game. I think if they drop both of those games, the North Carolina game and the Clemson game, I think if they drop both of those games, I don't think their season is going to amount to much by the end of the year, just because they still have to play the likes of NC State, Florida State, and Louisville. And I don't know if you lose to North Carolina and Clemson, I think you're going to lose 2 of those 3 remaining on the end of your schedule, on the back end of your schedule. So I'd like to see them beat North Carolina. I obviously don't want to see them beat Clemson because I'm a Clemson fan. But college football is fun when Miami's in the picture, in the championship picture. So I wouldn't mind seeing them, run the table and go undefeated and go in the playoffs. That would be something that nobody had circled, except maybe Miami fans. So it'd be very interesting. But my pick for the ACC this year is Florida State. As much as it hurts me to say that, obviously I'm not a Florida State fan. I hate Florida State as much as I hate South Carolina. But I think their only real test was against Clemson, and they passed the test against Clemson. Obviously, the win in overtime. So I know I had Florida State losing to Florida at the end of the year. I think that was the only game I had them losing to besides Clemson. I think I had them going 10-2. So I think even if they lose to Florida, they're still in the ACC title game, and they still beat whoever they play in the ACC title game. So very interesting team to watch. Feel like the last 2 weeks that we've seen them play, they haven't looked great. Obviously, they had a bye week this past week. This week they play Virginia Tech. I think they're going to thump Virginia Tech. Then you play Syracuse. Syracuse is no slouch. I know Clemson kind of got up on them early, but Syracuse is not a bad team. They have a pretty hard schedule. You play Syracuse, then Duke, then you play Miami and Florida at the end. So they're probably going to be favored in every one of those games by a touchdown or more. But I just hope somebody knocks them off. I'd love to see it. As a Clemson fan in me, obviously, Florida State fans are going to tell me no, but that's what I'd like to see. But nonetheless, that was my preview of the ACC, not preview, but I guess kind of thoughts on the ACC, basically halfway through the season. College football season is going by really fast, you guys. Let me know what you guys think about the ACC. What 2 teams you guys have going to the conference championship? Who do you have winning the conference championship and why? If you're a fan of an ACC team, please let me know how you feel your team is doing. How surprised are you guys that Louisville's 5-0? How surprised are you guys that Clemson's 3-2? It's been very fun kind of growing this channel and community. We are creeping up on 1,000 subscribers, so I think we're at 950. Please share this to a friend, a family member. Get more people on the channel to talk football with us. The link to the Discord and the pickem is in the description below. We're giving away a huge signed Heisman jersey at 1,000 subscribers. So please subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you do not miss an upload. Our next live show is going to be Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be previewing Week 6 matchups. It's going to be very fun. Red River rivalry this week. We're going to be dropping that video tomorrow, previewing that game. And just letting you know, I do have Oklahoma in that game. I have Oklahoma winning the Big 12 this year, you guys. So hopefully we get a good matchup tomorrow. Not tomorrow. A good matchup on Saturday with those 2 teams, and maybe even a rematch in the Big 12 title game. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for sticking around with me, kind of listening to my thoughts in the ACC. I look forward to reading the comment section, seeing where your guys' heads at on the Atlantic Coast Conference. We will see you guys tomorrow during the Oklahoma-Texas preview. Peace out.